girls, people of all ages. This is The Dark and Stormy Nights.
Very dramatic.
And this is Loki.
This is Tyr.
And Tyr has brought us a new story today, right? You've got a new section, a new chapter, if you will.
I do.
And she's going to tell us all about it.
Do we want to talk about where we were last
Sure, yeah. Give us some backstory. Lead us up to it.
I don't remember. It was your chapter. And it's too early.
I don't either. I've had insomnia, and so it's hard to remember anything.
Oh, how could we forget Father Dwight?
Oh, yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
I think I accidentally referred to him as a reverend in my chapter, though. Whatever. We'll fix that.
No, it depends. I mean, whatever people like better, right? But I feel like he's more of an official, like, priest of a faith that may remain unmentioned or whatever. I don't know. Just so we don't,
Okay.
That's
fine. I just
make
used the wrong
anybody
wording.
feel too like, well, my religion doesn't have things that eat corpses,
Well, your religion sounds boring. So
I'd much rather have this guy around.
right? So in the last chapter, we got most of the Bodak body off to the priest.
Yes.
And we took a detour in the underground world, the marketplace, to visit Esmeralda, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And get a little bit of vague information, as well as some fun futures, and then basically a whole chapter of Lee ignoring Nigel.
Yeah. I feel like maybe if Shayla got obsessed enough, she might move Ezzy into her house.
Esmeralda?
Yeah.
She'll just take her.
Yeah, she'll just take her.
And then she'll keep conning Elliot to take her back to the coin place so she can to play more skee balls so she can pocket more coins. That's a possibility. Do you want me to go ahead and start the new chapter here?
If you're ready.
Should I break it up or just go all the way through? It's a pretty short one.
No, you can just go through if you'd like.
Okay.
I know it's harder to break up shorter chapters.
Yeah. All right. You've been ignoring me, Nigel said as he strode into the apartment and set the take-up bags on the table. That's ridiculous. I've just been busy. Nigel gave him a flat look, and Lee sighed and shoved a hand through his graying hair. What do you want from me, Nigel? I'm still working the case. I'm not running from my debt, but even you have to admit the Combine isn't coming out of this one looking like the good guys. I'm well aware of that, Lee. The actions of the past were unexcusable and do not represent the intentions of the entire Combine. Many of us didn't know what had taken place so many years before we joined them, and we've spoken out against their actions. Oh, you've spoken out, Elliot interrupted. The mass-murdering elders, dictators, have gotten a tongue-lashing from their colleagues. That makes everything better. Did you ditch the bathrobe for this conversation? The kid's got a point, Nigel. How can the Combine expect to lead when you've lost all trust, all respect, and all the support you once had? You guys are powerful, but that's not going to be enough to take on the entire community. Most of the hunters aren't even loyal to you anymore. And we're trying to fix that. I have a message I need you to deliver. Fix? By sending in people to attack them? Jesus, Nigel, why the hell would they listen to anything you have to say? The Combine didn't agree to that. A small sect of elders took matters into their own hands, and they've been relieved of their positions because of it. Lee crossed his arms over his chest and gave Nigel a flat look. Your unwavering faith in me is truly heartwarming, Nigel gritted out, casting his magic on the wall with a wave of his coffee mug. Glowing purple fissures webbed out from the center until a window appeared as tall as Lee. An image of the Combine's magic prison came into view, and a minotaur that Lee had hauled in months ago appeared within a cell. The moment he laid eyes on Lee, he was on his feet, hooves. Carver, the beast growled before charging the magically reinforced bars. With a wave of his hand, Nigel panned to the left until another cell came into view. This one held an older man that Lee didn't recognize. The man looked up with a blank expression and returned his attention back to the wall, disinterested in their visit. Back to gloat already, Nigel? How long you must have been waiting for this moment. Revel in your victory if you must, but spare us the theatrics. No one believes this was anything more than a power grab. Nigel shook his head sadly. I've no need for more power, nor the desire to oppress my brothers and sisters in the magical community. The man's face soured. You would liken yourself to them? You have more power at hand than most of them will see in a lifetime, and you expect me to believe that you consider them kin? They're not your equals. Can an ogre draw power from its surroundings? Can a witch cross the veil? Can a shifter bring someone back from the brink of death? Can a sorcerer give life without taking it from somewhere else? Nigel interrupted. We can't, but Woodland Fae can. They can breathe life back into dying plants, and it takes nothing from them. It's what they are. Before you destroyed them, the older witch lines had books of spells that put our libraries to shame. Shifters are born with incredible strength, but young sorcerers are vulnerable until they've studied long enough to defend themselves. Everyone doesn't need to be the same to be equal. All deserve to be treated fairly, regardless of our differences. What they ask for is far from unreasonable. The man stood and paced closer. His lips curled into a cruel smile. I'll forgive your ignorance just this once because you're young. We too failed to anticipate the struggle to maintain order when we were young and naive. But your bleeding heart rhetoric will only get you so far. It'll start with a seat at the table, but it won't end there. It never does. Their power will strengthen as their lines carry on, and your authority will diminish as theirs grows. And when that happens, you'll be back. You'll see what happens when the balance of power shifts, and you will know I was right to act now, to crush this uprising before it grows out of control. Nigel shook his head. I don't believe I will. And I don't think you believe that either. For starters, what you preach is exactly what has gotten you into this mess. The sorcerers have no right to impose their will on the unrepresented masses with impunity. Attempting genocide in order to prevent other races from growing in power and in numbers is all the proof we need that the sorcerers are far from superior. That you've let your fear drive such malicious acts is truly distressing. And your stunt with the unauthorized mercenary team only shows that in all your years, you haven't learned anything. You've only fed your irrational fears until they drive your every reaction, and that is truly pathetic. I won't be back. The world is a safer place with you here. You'll be back. You know I'm right, the man yelled as Nigel withdrew his magic, leaving them staring at a blank wall. Lee sighed and scrubbed a hand over his face once more. His usual response of pawning the job off on someone else wasn't going to cut it this time. Nigel had known exactly what he was doing. Fine, but you're paying double for this shit. Nigel waved him off. Get them to agree to meet for negotiations and I'll triple it. Lee's eyebrows rose. You should have opened with that, Nigel. The sorcerer shook his head. Whether you admit it or not, Lee, money is only part of the equation. The biggest part, he agreed. Break time's over, kid. Grab the gear and a carton of Kung Pao chicken. Elliot stood from the table with a mouthful of fried rice. You got it, he agreed, tossing a fortune cookie Lee's way. Let me know how it goes. I have to get back, Nigel said as he slipped out the door, crouching to wake the delivery guy on his way out. Lee shook his head and cracked open his cookie, stuffing half of it in his mouth while he waited for Elliot. As he was tossing the wrapping, the message from the cookie caught his eye. The future is filled with luck and prosperity. Not yours, though. You should probably stay home. Great, Lee grumbled. Ren plucked the message from his hand. Oof, that's not a good sign. She rubbed his back and tossed it into the trash. Gary and I will come with. That should grease the wheels at least a little. Lee shivered as she dragged her hand down his spine, and he dropped a kiss on her lips before turning for the door. Let's get this over with. Why are you even entertaining this? He works from the Combine. He's a bounty hunter, not one of us. The Combine makes their demands and their lapdogs do their bidding, hauling us in with no questions asked, Annalise yelled over the commotion of the crowd. Lee had caused quite the uproar with the delivery of their request for peaceful negotiations. Many of the group seemed to be on the fence and reluctant to choose war as their only option. But there were a select few that seemed hell-bent on a fight. War would be a messy affair for Lee, and he wanted nothing to do with it. Trapped between debt and loyalty, between obligation and doing what was right. It was an impossible position to be in. But his life wasn't his, to do as he pleased. Far too much of it was out of his control, short of Nigel dying, and even then he wasn't sure. There was no escaping what he owed. Still, He'd never considered himself an enemy to the community. If anything, he was far more like them than the Combine. But this Fey woman had barely let him explain why he was there before she tried to silence him. I'm a bounty hunter that takes jobs from the Combine. That's not a secret. But there are plenty here that will confirm I do not do their bidding with no questions asked. Ain't that right, Petrie? The group's attention turned to the being in the suit, and the window on the mask fogged up as he shifted uncomfortably. He's telling the truth. Lee has a loose relationship with rules. No one that knows him would call him a lapdog. Lee nodded his thanks at the reluctant answer before addressing the group again. I won't pretend that the Combine has been infallible. Far from it. I saw what you did, and I don't condone it in the least. But many of those in the Combine don't either, and they weren't around when those acts took place. The last attack was mere days ago, Annalise piped up again. Lee shook his head. That was an unsanctioned attack, and those responsible have been removed from their positions. The Combine does not want a war. They are open to change. They are willing to talk. What do you have to lose by hearing them out? By attempting to negotiate before you risk the lives of those around you? Lee looked around at the faces of the crowd and knew that he had gotten through to many of them. Honestly, many seemed more open to negotiations than he would have been in their position. What of the recent attack? Someone yelled from the crowd. Lee's eyebrows furrowed. What recent attack? The elders responsible for the mercenaries are locked up. The nightmare demon. It injured itself destroying a building. The Bodak, Lee questioned, as Shayla whistled innocently and wandered over to hide behind Elliot. That thing has been attacking sorcerers. It wasn't sent by them. That demon was my bounty. It's killed multiple hunters. So you say, Annalise pointed out. But again, we have no reason to believe you. This could all be a trap. He's telling the truth, Ren spoke up. Penny knows it's true. She helped him figure out what it was. I was there, Gary raised his hand. Seen it with my own eyes. Lee's been chasing this thing since before any of this started. Brought back all those changelings, let loose ghosts. Messy. That thing wasn't good for any of us, but it wasn't the Combine that brought it here. So who summoned the Bodak? Lee shook his head. Case ain't over yet, but I'd be real interested to know who killed it. Several sets of eyes turned on Annalise, and Lee followed the direction of their stare until his attention landed on her as well. His eyes narrowed, and she glared right back, lifting her chin defiantly. If you were a decent bounty hunter, you'd know that nightmare demons can get inside your head. I had to kill it before it fed off of us. Yeah, I'm sure you were real scared of a half-dead demon. Anyone get a read on it before it died? It was killed before we had a chance. One of the group with a mental ability, it replied. Was it? He grumbled, once again eyeing the elf. I listed that as, what was it called, a Fomorian?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll have to, edit that. I don't know, do we want him to know what it is?
What she is?
Yeah.
He might know it because they're powerful.
Okay, so I start it, and we'll come back to it. I kind of
You can also... they may... by mythological means, it may or may not be the same thing as a dark elf.
That's kind of what I did, was listed as like a dark elf. But so we can edit this little section here if you want to. I put a little note by it so that we could discuss it.
Sure.
All right. So, was it? He grumbled, eyeing the Fomorian once more. It was rare to see a Fae of her stature on Earth. Most had gone back to their own world before the sorcerers decided to close the gates. A lot of low Fae were left behind when the ruling classes left, but the ruling class and soldiers hadn't been seen in his lifetime. But Fae still found their way through on occasion. Wild openings appeared now and again, and things happened. They managed to sneak their changelings through, or wait for an unsuspecting human to drop through to their side and get trapped. So while it wasn't unheard of for an elf to be on their world, it was one more thing making Lee suspicious of this woman. Whoever summoned the Bodak is no friend of the Combine or the Hunters. It uncovered secrets they would never have unburied, and while that might seem like it was acting on your behalf, it also very nearly exposed everything to the humans. I don't think I have to tell you how dangerous that is for all of us. I'm going to find the person responsible for releasing that thing. I suggest you put together a team of representatives and a list of what you expect out of negotiations. Too many lives have been lost already. Don't risk more unless they leave you no choice. And I don't think it will come down to that. You have more power than you realize, and they know it. Use it to make this right. Lee once again turned his attention to Annalise. The crowd was turning away from her cries for war, and they both knew it. The scowl on her face deepened, and she watched more and more switch from bloodthirsty to hopeful. She spun on her heel and stormed off, clearly uninterested in talks of peace. Lee turned and headed in the other direction, but he had a feeling it wouldn't be the last he saw of her. He was almost to his next destination by the time Elliot and the gang caught up. "Lee, where you headin'?" Gary asked. "Why are we back here?" Shayla added. "Got a bounty to collect. Need the evidence." Elliot's nose wrinkled. "You're not serious." "You already fed its body to the Reverend. All that's left is the head, and it was stomped into the ground," Gary pointed out. Elliot gagged. Lee shrugged. "That'll have to do. Don't suppose anyone brought a shovel." Rowan jumped to her feet as Annalise stormed back into the cottage. The dark elf shot her a look of disgust before pulling several large books from her shelves and dropping them to the heavy work table. Rowan made her way to the other side of the table. "I take it the meeting didn't go well?" The woman snarled. Lee showed up. "Lee? Why?" The sorcerers want to negotiate. Apparently, they're willing to give up their absolute power, and everyone is dumb enough to believe that it will last. Fools. Rowan cocked her head to the side. "What about the mercenaries?" Annalise waved a dismissive hand. "Apparently sent by a dissenting sect of elders without permission. They've been removed from their positions." "Oh. So they've punished those that attacked, and they're willing to cede power to form a ruling body that represents everyone?" Rowan asked, unable to keep the hope from her voice. Annalise noticed. Her eyes rose slowly until they snagged Rowan in her stare. Rowan swallowed hard. She'd been with Annalise since she was a child, and she'd learned the hard way that pissing the woman off was never a good idea. Still, her obedience to the elf that owned her didn't extend beyond obligation. She did what was asked of her because she had no choice, not because she approved. Maybe it would be better to campaign for one of the representative seats instead of seeking war. "Isn't being a part of the leaders enough?" she asked softly. Her eyes had remained on Annalise's hands when she spoke, so she knew the hit was coming before the pain exploded across her cheek. She stumbled back, squeezing her eyes shut. "Remember your place," Annalise snarled. "I am the daughter of a queen. I will not be relegated to the ranks of the Combine. They had their chance to accept that option. Instead, they took our power by force. No longer will I accept the meager scraps they offer, placating those that they've wronged. I am royalty, and it is time we all acted like it." Annalise flipped through the books, jumping from one to the next, and Rowan wiggled her jaw and swiped the blood from her lip. "What are you looking for?" she asked, staying far enough back that she would be difficult to reach. "The hunter ruined everything. Without the support of the community, I'll need an army of my own." Rowan's eyes dropped to the books, scanning from one to the next until she realized what Annalise was going to do. "You're looking for a wild portal to the Feyworld?" Annalise rolled her eyes, but the insult to Rowan's intelligence was implied. Considering how often the woman called her stupid, she knew it wasn't an attempt to spare her feelings. Wild gates or portals were the only known way to travel between the worlds anymore, unless you had a hell of a lot of power and a major celestial event to work with. Wild portals were exactly what they sounded like, gateways that occurred naturally due to some thinning of the veil. But they were unstable and sometimes dangerous, and also temporary. The veil wasn't alive really, but when a tear occurred in the form of a wild gate, it began to heal. There was no way to know how long it would be there before you were trapped on the other side. They were horribly unpredictable too. Sometimes the tear appeared for weeks, other times it was hours. And since time passed differently on the Feyworld than it did on the human world, it only contributed to the problems. If Annalise was going to take Rowan through, there was a good possibility that neither of them were coming back. A book thunked down in front of Rowan, interrupting her internal meltdown. "I need you to get me everything on this list," Annalise instructed. Rowan's eyes scanned the ritual, and she immediately realized what the plan was. Annalise was going to pin a gate open. The spell was powerful enough to hold it open for a while, perhaps long enough to find those loyal to her bloodlines. It was also powerful enough to draw the attention of any powerful magic user in the area. But Rowan didn't dare bring that up. Instead, she memorized the list of ingredients and made her way out to the market, ignoring the way her heart ached with the heaviness of guilt for her part in Annalise's plan. "Where is it?" Rowan asked, scanning the field. Annalise ignored the question and began heading for the tree line. Rowan grabbed the supplies in the book and scrambled to keep up. She still wasn't sure if she was going through, and she was afraid to ask. When they finally crossed the trees, the glimmer in the air was barely visible even to her. Rowan went to work setting out the things Annalise had asked her to get, and then she opened the book to the ritual. Annalise began the ritual as Rowan read along. Her eyes snagged on the final part of the spell, and her brows pulled together. They were missing something. The pin required a constant power source, something that would drain slowly while they were on the other side. A life force, she realized, just as the tug in her gut accompanied her grim realization. Rowan needn't have worried about getting trapped in Fae. Annalise had no intention of taking her through. Rowan fought against the pull and cried out in pain when that only made it worse. Her weakening body dropped to the ground, unable to move as she slowly fed the spell. Annalise stepped over her body, not sparing her a second glance as she approached the now brighter opening. "Try not to die before I get back," was the elf's last order before she stepped into the portal. All right, that's it.
That's it. Okay. So I got some stuff to work with there. So yeah, I saw you used. Did you like slip Dark Elf in that second time, or was that like? Did you already write that in?
No, the elf part was already in there. I had already used both elf and Fomorian,
Okay.
so that's what why I paused and like double checked with you that we were like interchangeably using those.
So technically, Fomorian is Celtic myth, and Dark Elf is Norse myth.
Okay,
or whatever,
so we can
but
adjust it however you want.
I believe they are describing the same thing.
Right.
You know, so it's just these guys think they're this, these guys think
Right.
and then also there's some speculation that Fomorians are, when they described the Fomorians, they were describing the Aesir, which is another story altogether, because one of the prime characters of the Fomorians is Balor, who is a one-eyed, god, basically, that may very well be Odin.
Oh, really?
So, right. Well, because if they're an invading force, that may be how they saw him.
I feel like I've seen the Balor character as like a Cyclops or something.
Yeah, he's got one good eye, and then he's got an eye patch over the other eye, and if he can lift with all of his might that eye patch, a beam of death shoots from that eye.
Interesting.
So it's an interesting concept, but the mythology is muddy because at one point these two cultures may have been enemies and have seen each other in that kind of light, So, but yeah, I think that Fomorians and Dark Elf are supposed to be the same thing.
Right. Okay. So I mean, we can tweak it any way you want. It's just, it is what it is.
So, okay. So, next week we're going to have to hash out where we go from here.
Yeah, I assume we'll follow Reyna/Annalise through.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good betrayal right there. I mean, I'm not sure what we're going to do about it. So,
what do you mean?
We'll have to give her a sock to free her. So.
Oh, you mean Rowan?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, all right. Do we have anything else?
I don't think so, unless there was anything you wanted like changed or.
No, I think it's good overall.
Okay.
So
I mean, it was pretty much like a transition chapter. It's not like there was anything super exciting going on.
I think we've got more book than you think there is.
What do you mean?
You're thinking there's only a couple chapters left after this, and I think there's more than a couple.
Really?
Yeah. Like
we'll see how it pans
maybe
out.
3 or 4 at least.
Really?
Yeah. But we'll see. We'll
Yeah.
see. It's kind of been organically growing.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, I guess we'll see you guys next week. Don't forget to check us out on Twitter at the Dark Stormy K1, on Reddit at r/Dark and Stormy Nights. We're on Facebook. You can find the podcast anywhere podcasts can be found, including YouTube. So, although we don't get much YouTube traffic. So I don't know. Maybe I didn't do something right and it's not very visible. Who knows? Let me know if you guys find out something I don't know. So, and don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, tell your friends about it, leave us a review. We'll be eternally grateful. So, thanks, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.